The dust devils were spinning across the cracked earth when Georgia Ramsey collapsed on the outskirts of Pinos Altos, New Mexico, her dress soaked through with blood that was not entirely her own, her lips cracked and bleeding, her eyes seeing nothing but the endless sky above that promised neither mercy nor salvation. It was August of 1878, and the sun beat down with the kind of merciless intensity that made men question their faith and women wonder if hell could possibly be worse than this high desert territory, where water was worth more than gold and human life even cheaper. Nathan Rivers saw her fall from nearly a quarter-mile away. He had been tracking a mountain lion that had taken 3 of his cattle in the past week, following the prints through the scrubby juniper and pinon pine that gave the town its name. The figure in the distance moved like a wounded animal, staggering and weaving, and for a moment he thought perhaps he had found his quarry after all. But then the shape resolved itself into something distinctly human, and he spurred his horse forward, his tracking forgotten. When he reached her, she was barely breathing. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular gasps that spoke of someone who had given up on the prospect of drawing another breath, but whose body stubbornly refused to quit. Nathan dismounted in one fluid motion, his boots hitting the hard-packed earth with a soft thud. He knelt beside her and turned her gently onto her back. Her face was burned raw by the sun, her blonde hair matted with dirt and dried blood. There was a wound on her side, not fresh but infected, the fabric of her dress stiff with old blood and pus. "Madam," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Madam, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered but did not open. Her lips moved soundlessly. Nathan looked around quickly, assessing the situation with the practiced eye of a man who had survived 10 years on this unforgiving frontier. She needed water, shade, and medical attention in that order. The nearest doctor was in Silver City, a full day's ride south. She would never make it. He uncapped his canteen and dribbled a small amount of water onto her lips. She did not swallow. He tried again, this time using his finger to part her lips and let the water trickle into her mouth. This time her throat convulsed weakly and she swallowed. It was the smallest of victories, but Nathan felt a surge of hope nonetheless. "That is right," he murmured. "Come on, stay with me." He gave her another small sip, then another. Her eyelids fluttered again, and this time they opened a crack. Her eyes were blue, he saw, the color of a winter sky, and they were filled with a terrible, haunting emptiness. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible. "Let me die." "No, madam," Nathan said firmly. "I will not." He scooped her up as gently as he could, feeling how light she was, how fragile. She could not have weighed more than 100 pounds, and most of that seemed to be determination and stubbornness. He settled her across his saddle, mounted behind her, and held her against his chest as he turned his horse back toward town. Pinos Altos was a mining town, one of the many that had sprung up in the New Mexico territory after gold was discovered in the nearby hills. It had seen better days. The easy gold was gone now, and most of the prospectors had moved on to richer strikes in Colorado or California. The people who remained were the ones who had nowhere else to go, or who had put down roots too deep to tear up easily. There was a general store, a saloon, a livery stable, and a scattering of adobe houses and wooden shacks. The nearest thing to a medical professional was Maria Gutierrez, a Mexican woman who served as midwife and healer for the community. Nathan rode straight to Maria's small adobe house on the eastern edge of town. He dismounted carefully, keeping the unconscious woman cradled in his arms, and kicked at the door with his boot. "Maria, I need help!" The door swung open almost immediately. Maria was a woman in her 50s, her black hair streaked with silver, her dark eyes sharp and intelligent. She took one look at the woman in Nathan's arms and stepped aside. "Bring her in, put her on the table." Nathan carried his burden inside and laid her on the heavy wooden table that dominated Maria's main room. The house smelled of herbs and wood smoke. Bundles of dried plants hung from the ceiling beams, and the shelves that lined the walls were crowded with jars and bottles containing mysterious substances. Maria was already moving, her hands quick and sure, as she began to cut away the woman's dress. Nathan turned away, giving her privacy, but Maria called him back. "I need your help, Nathan. Hold her down if she wakes." He returned to the table and positioned himself at the woman's head, ready to restrain her if necessary. Maria worked in silence for several minutes, her face grave. When she finally spoke, her voice was grim. "This wound is badly infected. It looks like a knife wound several days old. She has fever, dehydration, and she is severely malnourished. Where did you find her?" "Out past the Juniper Ridge, walking toward town, or trying to. She collapsed about a quarter-mile from the last house." Maria nodded, unsurprised. "She is very sick. I will do what I can, but Nathan, you must understand. She may not survive the night. Her body is fighting very hard just to keep breathing." "Do whatever you can," Nathan said. "Whatever it costs, I will pay it." Maria glanced up at him, something knowing in her dark eyes. "You do not even know who she is." "Does not matter. She is a human being who needs help." Over the next several hours, Nathan watched as Maria worked to save the stranger's life. She cleaned and drained the infected wound, packed it with a poultice made from herbs Nathan could not name, and stitched it closed with thread that looked too thick for such delicate work, but which Maria assured him would hold. She forced water down the woman's throat, a teaspoon at a time, mixed with something that smelled bitter and medicinal. She bathed her fevered skin with cool cloths and covered her with a light blanket. Through it all, the woman remained unconscious, her breathing shallow and labored. Nathan stayed at her bedside, watching the rise and fall of her chest, willing her to keep fighting. He did not understand this fierce protectiveness he felt toward a complete stranger, but he could not deny it. There was something about her that called to him, some quality he could not name but recognized on a level deeper than words. As the sun set and the room filled with shadows, Maria lit several candles and placed them around the table. In their flickering light, the woman's face looked even more gaunt and pale. Maria checked her pulse, her forehead, the bandage on her side. "The fever is very high," she said quietly. "The next few hours will tell us whether she lives or dies. You should go home, Nathan. Get some rest. There is nothing more you can do here." "I am staying," Nathan said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Maria studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "As you wish. I will make some coffee." The night crawled by with agonizing slowness. The woman's fever climbed higher, and she began to thrash and mutter in her delirium. Nathan held her hand, speaking to her in a low, steady voice, though he doubted she could hear him. "You have to fight," he told her. "I know you are tired. I know you have been through hell, but you have to keep fighting. Do not give up now, not when you have come this far." Near midnight, her thrashing became more violent. Her eyes opened, but they were glassy and unfocused, seeing things that were not there. She cried out in a language Nathan did not recognize, her voice raw with terror. "Hold her still," Maria commanded, hurrying over with a cup of some dark liquid. "She will tear her stitches." Nathan gently but firmly pinned the woman's shoulders to the table. She fought him with a strength that seemed impossible given her condition, her body arching and twisting. Maria managed to get some of the liquid into her mouth, and after a few moments the woman's struggles began to weaken. Her eyes closed again, and her breathing, though still labored, became more regular. "What did you give her?" Nathan asked. "Something to help her sleep. The body heals better when it is at rest." Maria wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. "You should sleep too, Nathan. You look exhausted." "I am fine." "You are not fine. You are as stubborn as this woman, I think. At least sit down before you fall down." Nathan settled into a chair beside the table, but he did not take his eyes off the woman. As the hours passed and the candles burned low, he found himself studying her face, committing every detail to memory. Even ravaged by fever and injury, she was beautiful. But it was not her physical beauty that held him captive. It was something else, something in the set of her jaw, the determined line of her mouth even in unconsciousness. This was a woman who had survived things that would have broken a lesser person. This was a woman who had fought her way across miles of desert with an infected wound and no water, driven by nothing but sheer will. And somewhere along that journey, that will had finally flickered down to almost nothing. But Nathan would not let it go out. He would breathe on that ember until it flamed again, no matter how long it took. Dawn broke gray and cool over Pinos Altos. The woman's fever had finally broken sometime before sunrise, and she slept peacefully for the first time since Nathan had found her. Maria checked her vital signs and changed her bandages, satisfaction evident on her weathered face. "She will live," Maria pronounced. "The fever has passed. Now she needs food, rest, and time to heal." Nathan felt something tight in his chest loosen. "Thank God. Thank God, yes, and thank whatever kept her walking when she should have died. That woman has the strongest will to survive I have ever seen. Most people would have laid down and died after the first day with a wound like that. Do you have any idea who she might be? Where she came from? Maria shook her head. There are no identifying marks on her clothing, no jewelry. When she wakes, perhaps she will tell us. For now, she needs to be moved to a bed. She cannot stay on my table forever. I will take her to my place, Nathan said immediately. I have a spare room, and my sister can help care for her. Maria raised an eyebrow. Your sister? Nathan, Sarah left for Denver 3 months ago to marry that banker. Do not tell me you have forgotten already. Nathan felt his face heat. He had indeed forgotten. Sarah's departure had left him alone in the small house on the outskirts of town, with no one but his horses and cattle for company. Right, well, I can care for her myself. A single man, alone in a house with an unmarried woman? Nathan Rivers, you know better than that. The gossips in this town would have a field day. I do not care what people say. Perhaps not, but she might. When she wakes up, she will need her reputation intact, not tattered by rumors. Nathan clenched his jaw in frustration. Maria was right, of course. In a small town like Pinos Altos, reputation was everything. But the thought of leaving this woman in someone else's care made his stomach twist. What do you suggest? She stays here with me, Maria said firmly. I have the room, and I can watch over her properly. You can visit, of course. I am sure she will want to thank her rescuer when she is well enough. Nathan wanted to argue, but he knew it was pointless. Maria had made up her mind, and when Maria Gutierrez made up her mind, not even a team of oxen could shift her. Fine, but I will be checking in regularly, and if anything changes, you send for me immediately. Of course. Now go home, Nathan. Get some sleep. You have been up all night. Reluctantly, Nathan left Maria's house and made his way back to his own place. It was a modest adobe structure with a wooden addition that Sarah had insisted on building. The house felt empty and quiet without his sister's presence, just as it always did these days. He fed his horses, checked on his remaining cattle, and then collapsed onto his bed, fully clothed. Sleep claimed him almost immediately. He dreamed of blue eyes and whispered please, of walking through an endless desert following a figure that was always just out of reach. It was late afternoon when he woke, disoriented and groggy. He washed his face in the basin on his dresser, changed his clothes, and headed back to Maria's house. The sun was slanting low across the mountains, painting everything in shades of gold and red. Maria greeted him at the door with a finger to her lips. She is still sleeping, but it is a natural sleep now, not fever-induced. This is good. Nathan nodded and followed Maria inside. The woman had been moved to a small cot in the corner of the room, covered with a clean blanket. Her face was still pale, but the terrible grayness had faded from her skin. She looked almost peaceful. Has she woken at all? Briefly, about an hour ago. She was confused and frightened. I gave her some water, and she fell back asleep. I think tomorrow she will be more alert. Nathan pulled a chair close to the cot and sat down. Maria made no comment, simply going about her business preparing the evening meal. The smell of beans and cornbread filled the small house. As darkness fell, Nathan finally stirred. I should go, let you rest. You can stay if you wish, Maria said. I do not mind the company. I have early chores tomorrow, but I will be back. I know you will. Nathan returned the next morning to find Maria spooning broth into the woman's mouth. She was awake, propped up on pillows, her blue eyes clear and alert. When she saw Nathan, those eyes widened slightly, and something flickered across her face too quickly for him to read. You, she said, her voice hoarse and weak. You are the one who found me. Nathan removed his hat and stepped closer. Yes, madam. Nathan Rivers. I am glad to see you awake. I told you to let me die. There was no accusation in her voice, only a flat statement of fact. I know. I did not listen. Why? It was a simple question, but Nathan found he did not have a simple answer. Because you deserved a chance. Because no one should die alone in the desert if it can be prevented. Because I could not live with myself if I had ridden past and done nothing. She studied him for a long moment, her gaze penetrating. Then she looked away. You should have listened. You do not know what you have saved. A human life, Nathan said quietly. That is all I need to know. Maria cleared her throat. Introductions can wait. This young lady needs to eat and regain her strength. Nathan, make yourself useful and fetch some more water from the well." Nathan did as he was told, giving the women some privacy. When he returned with a full bucket, he found Maria changing the woman's bandages. The wound on her side looked much better, the angry red inflammation fading to a healthier pink. Over the next few days, the woman slowly regained her strength. She ate the food Maria prepared, drank water and tea, and slept for long stretches, but she spoke little, and when she did, it was only to answer direct questions. She did not volunteer her name or any information about where she had come from, or what had happened to her. Nathan visited every day, sometimes twice a day. He told himself he was simply checking on a person he had helped, but he knew it was more than that. He was drawn to her in a way he could not explain and did not entirely trust. She, for her part, seemed to tolerate his presence but showed no particular warmth toward him. It was Maria who finally pressed the issue, 5 days after Nathan had brought the woman to her house. The woman was sitting up in a chair by the window, strong enough now to leave the cot for short periods. Nathan sat across from her, ostensibly helping Maria wind yarn, but mostly just watching their patient. "I think it is time we knew your name, child," Maria said gently. "We cannot keep calling you the woman forever." The woman was silent for a long moment, staring out the window at the dusty street beyond. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Georgia Ramsey." "Georgia," Nathan repeated, tasting the name. It fit her somehow. "Where are you from, Miss Ramsey?" Georgia's hands clenched in her lap. "Does it matter?" "It might. You may have family looking for you, people who are worried." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "I have no family, not anymore." "What happened to you?" Nathan asked. "That knife wound. Who did that to you?" Georgia was silent for so long that Nathan thought she would not answer. Then, in a voice devoid of emotion, she began to speak. "I was married to a man named James Coulter. We had a ranch in Colorado near Denver. I thought we were happy. I thought he loved me." She paused, swallowing hard. "I was wrong. He was a cruel man, a violent man. He liked to hurt me. At first it was just words, then slaps, then worse. I tried to leave twice. Both times he found me and brought me back. The second time, he broke my arm." Nathan felt anger rising in his chest like a physical thing. Maria made a small sound of sympathy. 3 weeks ago, he came home drunk, drunker than usual. We fought. He had a knife. I do not remember much of what happened next. I remember pain and blood, and then I was running. I took his horse and rode south for 2 days straight. When the horse went lame, I turned it loose and kept walking. I walked for days. I ran out of water. The wound got infected. I knew I was dying, and I did not care. I wanted to die. I wanted it all to end. But you kept walking, Nathan said softly. I do not know why. Some stupid part of me that would not quit, I suppose. Even when I wanted to stop. Even when I begged myself to just lie down and let it be over. My body kept moving. That is called strength, Maria said firmly. That is called courage. Georgia shook her head. It is called stupidity. What was the point? To survive just to go through more of the same? James will find me eventually. He always does. Not here, Nathan said, his voice hard. Not in Pinos Altos. Not while I'm still breathing. Georgia looked at him then. Really looked at him. And for the first time since she had woken, Nathan saw something other than emptiness in her eyes. It might have been hope, or it might have been fear. He could not tell. You do not know my husband, she said quietly. You do not know what he is capable of. Maybe not, but he does not know me either. Over the following weeks, Nathan watched as Georgia slowly came back to life. It was like watching a plant that had been withered by drought respond to water. First came the physical healing. The wound on her side closed cleanly, leaving a puckered scar that Maria assured her would fade with time. She gained weight, the hollows in her cheeks filling out, color returning to her skin. She grew strong enough to walk around Maria's house, then around the small yard, then into town. But the emotional healing took longer. She startled at loud noises. She flinched when someone moved too quickly near her. She had nightmares that left her gasping and shaking in the dark. Nathan wanted to help, wanted to somehow take away her pain, but he did not know how. All he could do was be present, steady and reliable, a constant in her chaotic world. He fell into the habit of walking with her in the evenings when the worst heat of the day had passed. They would stroll along the outskirts of town, past the old mine shafts and the scattered piñon pines, talking or not talking as the mood struck them. Gradually, Georgia began to open up, sharing small pieces of her history. She had grown up in Missouri, the daughter of a school teacher and a seamstress. She had been educated, taught to read and write and do sums. Her parents had died of cholera when she was 17, and she had been sent to live with an aunt in Denver. It was there she had met James Coulter. He had been charming and attentive during their courtship, the perfect gentleman. It was only after the wedding that his true nature had revealed itself. "I was so stupid," she said one evening as they watched the sun set over the mountains. All the signs were there, the way he talked about other people, always finding fault, the way he needed to control every little thing, the temper that would flare up over nothing. But I told myself I was imagining things, that he would change once we were married. "You were not stupid," Nathan said firmly. "You were young and alone in the world. You wanted someone to love you, someone to build a life with. There is nothing stupid about that. I should have seen what he was. He lied to you. He pretended to be someone he was not. The fault is his, not yours." Georgia was quiet for a moment. "You are very kind, Nathan Rivers. I do not think I deserve your kindness." "Everyone deserves kindness." She looked at him then, her blue eyes searching his face. "Why do you care so much? About me? I mean, you do not know me. I am just some woman you found in the desert." Nathan struggled to find the right words. The truth was, he did not fully understand it himself. Yes, Georgia was beautiful. Yes, he admired her strength and her spirit. But it was more than that. From the moment he had seen her collapse in the dust, something in him had recognized something in her. Two broken souls calling to each other across the vast loneliness of the frontier. "I know you better than you think," he finally said. "I know you are strong. I know you are brave. I know you survived things that would have killed most people. I know you have a good heart, even though someone tried very hard to break it. And I know that I like talking to you, walking with you, just being near you. Is that not enough?" George's eyes filled with tears. "I am still married, Nathan. In the eyes of the law, I belong to James Coulter. Even if he never finds me, even if I could somehow get a divorce, which is nearly impossible, I am damaged goods. No respectable man would want me now." "I do not give a damn about the law or respectability," Nathan said fiercely. "And you do not belong to anyone except yourself. You are not damaged. You are wounded, yes, but wounds heal. Give it time." "Time," Georgia repeated softly. "I am not sure how much time I have. James will not stop looking for me, and when he finds me—" She trailed off, but Nathan heard the fear in her voice. "If he comes here, he will have to go through me first. And I promise you, Georgia, I will not make it easy for him." She smiled then, a small, sad smile that broke Nathan's heart. "My knight in dusty denim." Something like that? As September gave way to October, Georgia moved out of Maria's house and into a small room above the general store. The proprietor, a widow named Mrs. Chen, needed help in the store and offered Georgia room and board in exchange for work. It was not much, but it was honest employment and a degree of independence that Georgia desperately needed. Nathan still saw her nearly every day. Sometimes he would stop by the store to buy supplies he did not really need, just for an excuse to talk to her. Other times they would meet for their evening walks, which had become a regular routine. The townspeople had started to notice, of course. In a place as small as Pinos Altos, nothing went unnoticed for long. Nathan heard the whispers and saw the knowing looks, but he ignored them. Let people talk. He did not care. What he did care about was the way Georgia's smile came more easily now, the way the shadows had begun to fade from her eyes. She was healing, slowly but surely, becoming the person she was meant to be before cruelty and violence had nearly destroyed her. She laughed more often, a sound that Nathan treasured like gold. She talked about the future, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. One evening in late October, as they sat on the ridge overlooking town watching the stars emerge, Georgia said something that made Nathan's heart skip a beat. "I think I am starting to remember who I used to be, before James. I used to love reading. I used to write poetry. I used to look forward to each new day, wondering what adventures it might bring. I had dreams, Nathan. I wanted to see the ocean. I wanted to travel to San Francisco and New York. I wanted to matter, to make a difference somehow. Then I met James, and all of that slowly died. He told me I was foolish, that my dreams were childish. that I should focus on being a proper wife. And eventually, I believed him. I let him kill the person I was. But that person is not dead, Nathan said. She was just buried for a while. Now she is coming back. Because of you, Georgia said softly. You breathed life back into me when I had nothing left. You made me want to live again. Nathan felt heat rise to his face. I did not do much. You did the hard work of surviving. You did everything, Georgia insisted. She turned to face him fully, and in the starlight her face was luminous. Nathan, I need to tell you something. I need you to understand how I feel. Nathan's mouth went dry. All right. I am falling in love with you, she said simply. Maybe I already have fallen in love with you. I know I should not. I know it is too soon, and I am still technically married. And there are 1,000 reasons why this is a terrible idea. But I cannot help it. You are kind and strong and good. And when I am with you, I feel safe for the first time in years. You make me believe that maybe, just maybe, I deserve to be happy. And I needed you to know that, even if nothing can come of it. For a moment, Nathan could not speak. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she must be able to hear it. Then, moving slowly so as not to startle her, he reached out and took her hand. Georgia Ramsey, I have been in love with you since the day I found you in that desert. I do not care about the law, or your past, or what people might say. All I care about is you, and this feeling right here. He pressed her hand to his chest so she could feel his racing heart. Tell me I am not alone in this. Tell me you feel it too. I feel it, she whispered. God help me, I feel it. Nathan leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she did not, when instead she tilted her face up toward his, he kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, soft and questioning, nothing like the violent claim James Coulter had made on her. This was a promise, an offering, a question and answer all at once. Georgia's lips trembled beneath his, and then she was kissing him back, her hands coming up to grip his shoulders as if he were the only solid thing in a spinning world. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Georgia's eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling. I never thought I would feel like this again, she said. I never thought I would want to feel like this again. I will never hurt you, Nathan said fiercely. I swear it on everything I hold sacred. I will never raise my hand to you, never speak a cruel word, never make you feel less than the remarkable woman you are. I know, Georgia said. I trust you, Nathan. That is the most terrifying part. After everything James did, I should not be able to trust anyone, but I trust you. They sat together on that ridge for hours, talking and kissing and planning impossible futures. Georgia told Nathan about her dreams, the ones she had thought were dead. Nathan shared his own hopes, things he had never spoken aloud to anyone. He wanted to expand his ranch, maybe buy some more land up in the high country where the grass grew thick. He wanted a family someday, children who would grow up knowing they were loved and valued. He wanted to grow old on this land that he had come to love, watching the seasons turn and the years pass. That sounds nice, Georgia said, resting her head on his shoulder. Peaceful. Would you want that? A quiet life on a ranch? I would want any life, as long as it was with you. But even as they dreamed, the shadow of James Coulter hung over them. Georgia could not legally marry Nathan while her husband still lived. And even if James never found them, even if they could build a life together here in Pinos Altos, it would always be under a cloud of illegitimacy. Their children, if they had any, would be bastards in the eyes of the law and society. There has to be a way, Nathan said. A legal way to end your marriage to that man. Divorce is nearly impossible to obtain in Colorado, Georgia said, especially for a woman. And even if I could somehow file for one, James would fight it. He would never let me go willingly. He told me once that I was his property, that I would be his until one of us died. I think he meant it. Then maybe we do not worry about the law, Nathan said. Maybe we just live our lives the way we want to live them and let the rest of the world think what it will. Georgia pulled back to look at him. You would do that? You would live in sin with me? Have everyone in town talking about us, knowing it would hurt your reputation? I would do a lot more than that for you. But Nathan knew, even as he said it, that it would not be so simple. In a small frontier town like Pinos Altos, reputation mattered. If word got out that Georgia was another man's wife, they would both be shunned. She might lose her job. He might lose business. And if James Coulter did eventually track them down, as Georgia feared he would, the law would be on his side. A man had rights over his wife, legal rights that no amount of moral outrage could override. As October turned to November, Nathan and Georgia tried to navigate this impossible situation. They were discreet, not flaunting their relationship, but not hiding it either. Nathan courted her properly, calling on her at the boarding house with Mrs. Chen as chaperone, taking her to the occasional dance or social gathering. To the townspeople of Pinos Altos, they appeared to be simply a young couple cautiously feeling their way toward a future together. But in private, away from prying eyes, their love deepened and intensified. Nathan had never felt this way about anyone. Georgia made him laugh, made him think, made him want to be a better man. She was smart and funny, and had a way of looking at the world that constantly surprised him. She read voraciously, borrowing books from anyone in town who had them, and she would talk to Nathan for hours about stories and ideas and philosophy. She challenged him, pushed back when she disagreed with him, treated him as an equal rather than as a master or authority figure. For Georgia, loving Nathan was both exhilarating and terrifying. Part of her kept waiting for him to change, to reveal himself as another James Coulter. But as the weeks passed and Nathan remained exactly who he had always been, kind and patient and steady, she began to believe that maybe this was real. Maybe this was what love was supposed to feel like. Not possession or control or fear, but partnership and respect and joy. They were sitting on the porch of Nathan's house one Sunday afternoon in mid-November when they saw the rider approaching. It was a stranger, a man on a tall black horse, dressed in dusty traveling clothes. Something about him made Nathan tense instinctively. The man reined in his horse and dismounted with the easy grace of someone who spent most of his life in the saddle. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard. He would have been handsome if not for the hardness in his eyes. "Good afternoon," the man said, his voice pleasant. "I am looking for someone, and I am hoping you might be able to help me. I am searching for my wife. She ran away from our home in Colorado a few months back. I have been tracking her ever since. Last I heard, she might have come this direction." Nathan felt Georgia go rigid beside him. He glanced at her and saw that all the color had drained from her face. Her eyes were fixed on the stranger with an expression of pure terror. The man followed Nathan's gaze and saw Georgia. His face split into a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Georgia," he said warmly. "There you are. I have been so worried about you, darling. We need to talk." Georgia stood on shaking legs, and Nathan rose with her, positioning himself slightly between her and the stranger. "Who are you?" "James Coulter," the man said, extending his hand. "This woman's husband. And you are?" Nathan ignored the offered hand. "Nathan Rivers, and the lady is not going anywhere with you." James's smile faded. "I think you are confused, friend. Georgia is my wife. She is not well. She gets confused sometimes, runs off. I have been half out of my mind with worry. Now, if you will excuse us, we have a long ride ahead of us." "No," Georgia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "No, I am not going with you, James." "Do not be silly, darling," James said, his tone hardening. "Of course you are coming home. You belong with me." "She does not want to go," Nathan said flatly. "You heard her. So I suggest you get back on your horse and ride on." James's expression turned dangerous. "You are interfering in a private matter between a man and his wife. That is not wise." "I do not care. She stays here." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Nathan could feel the violence coiled in James Coulter like a snake ready to strike. But they were in public, in broad daylight, with several townspeople watching from various vantage points. James could not simply drag Georgia away by force, not without causing a scene that would bring the law down on him. "I see," James said finally. His gaze shifted to Georgia. "So, this is how it is. You ran away from your lawful husband to whore yourself to the first man who would have you. I always knew you were a faithless slut, Georgia, but I have to admit, I am surprised you were so brazen about it." "Do not talk to her that way," Nathan growled. "I will talk to my wife however I please," James shot back. "And you, sir, are welcome to her. Let me tell you what you are getting into. She is a liar and a manipulator. She probably told you I beat her, did she not? That I was cruel to her? All lies. She is the one with the temper, the one who flies into rages over nothing. That knife wound? She did that to herself, trying to make me look bad. Then she ran off with my horse and $200 from our cash box. That is not true, Georgia said, finding her voice. Nathan, he is lying. Everything I told you was the truth. I know, Nathan said quietly. He believed her absolutely, without question. The terror in her eyes when she had first seen James Coulter told him everything he needed to know about who was telling the truth. James laughed. Besotted fool. Well, enjoy her while you can. When she tires of you, or when you tire of her lies and her tantrums, she will just run to the next man. That is what she does. Leave, Nathan said, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. Now, before this gets ugly. James's eyes flicked to the gun, then back to Nathan's face. All right, I am leaving, but understand this. Georgia is my wife, legally and in the eyes of God. I have every right to take her back, and the law is on my side. I am going to go see the local sheriff, explain the situation, and return with a court order. And when I do, you will hand her over or face the consequences. Think about that, Rivers. Think about whether this woman is really worth throwing away your life. James mounted his horse and rode toward the center of town. Nathan and Georgia stood frozen on the porch, watching him go. He is going to take me back, Georgia said dully. The law is on his side, Nathan. A wife is her husband's property. The sheriff will have no choice but to help him. No, Nathan said. I will not let that happen. You cannot stop it. If you try to interfere, they will arrest you. They might even hang you. Nathan turned to face her, gripping her shoulders gently. Listen to me, Georgia. I am not going to let James Coulter take you. I do not care what the law says. I do not care about court orders or property rights or any of it. You are not going back to a man who hurts you. Do you understand me? Nathan, you will be arrested. You could be killed. Then so be it. Some things are worth fighting for. You are worth fighting for. Georgia's eyes filled with tears. I cannot ask you to do this. I cannot ask you to risk everything for me. You are not asking. I am offering. No, I am insisting. Nathan pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. We will figure this out, I promise. But as he spoke the words, Nathan knew the situation was dire. James Coulter was right about one thing. The law was on his side. In the eyes of the law, Georgia belonged to her husband. If the sheriff got involved, Nathan would have no legal grounds to refuse to turn her over. And if he tried to resist, he would be guilty of everything from theft to kidnapping to interfering with a lawful marriage. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. That evening, Nathan called a meeting at Maria's house. In addition to Maria and Georgia, he invited Tom Sanderson, the town's unofficial lawyer, and Father Miguel, the Catholic priest who served the Mexican community. Nathan trusted these people, and he hoped they might have ideas he had not considered. When everyone was assembled, Nathan explained the situation as clearly and factually as he could. Georgia sat beside him, her face pale but composed. When he finished, there was a long silence. This is a difficult situation, Tom Sanderson said finally. The lawyer was a thin, scholarly man in his 50s who had come west for his health. Legally speaking, James Coulter has the right to reclaim his wife. The law is very clear on this point. A woman cannot simply leave her husband because she is unhappy, or even because he is violent. The only grounds for legal separation are adultery, abandonment, or extreme cruelty. And even then, divorce is very difficult to obtain. He stabbed her, Nathan said flatly. How much more extreme does the cruelty need to be? You would need witnesses, medical documentation, sworn testimony, and even then, it would have to be tried in a Colorado court, since that is where they were married and resided. The process could take years. We do not have years. James is going to the sheriff right now. Then I'm afraid there is not much we can do legally, Tom said. Unless, he trailed off thinking. Unless what? Unless Georgia is not here when James returns with the sheriff. If she were to leave Pinos Altos, go somewhere he could not find her, then the legal issue becomes moot. James could not force her to return if he did not know where she was. I will not run again, Georgia said quietly. I am tired of running. And besides, where would I go? James found me here. He would find me anywhere. Not necessarily, Maria interjected. If you went far enough, changed your name, started completely over, perhaps San Francisco or one of the other big cities, you could disappear into a place like that. Georgia shook her head. I would be alone. I would spend the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, waiting for him to appear. That is no way to live. There might be another option, Father Miguel said. Everyone turned to look at the priest. He was an elderly man with a deeply lined face and kind eyes. A more permanent solution. What do you mean? Nathan asked. Marriage, Father Miguel said simply. If Georgia were to marry you, Nathan, in the eyes of God and the church, then her marriage to James Coulter would be rendered invalid. The church does not recognize marriages where one party is coerced or subjected to violence. I could perform a ceremony tonight, and Georgia would be your wife, not James's. But that would not be legal, Tom protested. She is already married under civil law. Perhaps not legal in the eyes of the territory, Father Miguel agreed, but legal in the eyes of God, which is what truly matters, and it would give Nathan legal standing to protect her. If Georgia is his wife, even in a religious ceremony only, James Coulter would have a much harder time taking her. Nathan looked at Georgia. What do you think? Georgia's expression was a mixture of hope and fear. Would it really work? Would it protect us? It would complicate matters for James Coulter considerably, Tom said slowly. If you claimed to be Nathan's wife, if there was a religious ceremony to back that up, the sheriff would be caught between two competing claims. He would likely have to refer the matter to a judge, which could buy you time, and if the judge were sympathetic. He trailed off. It is risky, but it might work. Then let us do it, Nathan said. He took George's hand. If you are willing. I know this is not how you probably imagine getting married. There is no courtship period, no fancy dress or big celebration. But I love you, Georgia. I want to spend my life with you. I want to protect you and honor you and make you happy. Will you marry me? Georgia was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling too. Yes, yes, Nathan, I will marry you. Father Miguel nodded, satisfied. Then let us begin. The ceremony was brief and simple, conducted in Spanish and English in Maria's small living room. There were no guests beyond those already present, no flowers or music or celebration. Georgia wore the plain cotton dress she had on, and Nathan wore his work clothes. Father Miguel spoke the ancient words of the marriage rite, binding them together in the eyes of God. When it came time to exchange rings, Nathan realized with chagrin that he had none. Maria quickly removed a simple gold band from her own finger and handed it to him. For now, she whispered, you can get her a proper ring later. Nathan slipped the ring onto Georgia's finger, and she looked down at it with wonder. Then Father Miguel pronounced them man and wife, and Nathan kissed his bride for the first time as her husband. It was different from their other kisses, weighted with the solemnity of vows and promises. This was forever, or at least as close to forever as two people could claim in this uncertain world. Congratulations, Maria said, embracing them both. May you have a long and happy life together. We still have to deal with James Coulter, Tom reminded them. He will not accept this marriage. He will challenge it. Let him challenge, Nathan said. Georgia is my wife now, and I will defend her with everything I have. They did not have to wait long. The next morning, James Coulter returned with Sheriff William Hayes, and a document that he claimed gave him legal authority to take his wife back to Colorado. The sheriff was a weathered man in his 60s, competent but not overly energetic. He looked uncomfortable with the entire situation. Nathan met them at the door of his house, with Georgia standing behind him. Can I help you, Sheriff? Mr. Rivers, I am here on official business. Mr. Coulter has shown me proof that this woman is his lawfully wedded wife, and he has the right to take her back with him. I need you to step aside and let him do so. I am afraid I cannot do that, Sheriff. You see, Georgia is my wife. The sheriff blinked. Excuse me? We were married last night by Father Miguel, so she is no longer Mrs. Coulter. She is Mrs. Rivers. James Coulter's face turned an ugly shade of red. That is impossible. You cannot marry another man's wife. I did not marry another man's wife. I married a woman who was fleeing from violence and cruelty. The church does not recognize forced or abusive marriages. Therefore, in the eyes of God, Georgia was free to marry me. This is ridiculous, James sputtered. Sheriff, arrest this man. He is harboring my wife, interfering with my legal rights. The sheriff looked deeply uncomfortable. Mr. Rivers, is what you are saying true? You actually went through a marriage ceremony with this woman? Yes, sir. Father Miguel will confirm it. We have witnesses. But she is already married to Mr. Coulter. Under civil law, perhaps, but not in the eyes of the church, and I would argue that a marriage based on violence and intimidation is no marriage at all. The sheriff removed his hat and ran his hand through his thin hair. This is beyond my authority. I'm going to have to take this to Judge Morrison in Silver City. Until he makes a ruling, the status quo will have to remain. Mrs. Ramsey or Rivers or whoever you are, you will stay here in Pinos Altos. Mr. Coulter, you will find lodgings in town and await the judge's decision. And Mr. Rivers, you will keep your wife here and not try to leave the territory. Is that clear? Perfectly clear, Nathan said. This is outrageous, James protested. She is my wife. I have the legal documents to prove it. And Mr. Rivers claims she is his wife and says he has a religious ceremony to prove it. I am not a judge, Mr. Coulter. I cannot make a determination on this. We will have to wait for Judge Morrison. How long will that take? The judge makes his circuit every 6 weeks. He should be in Silver City within the month. Until then, everyone stays put. James looked like he wanted to argue further, but the sheriff's expression made it clear the discussion was over. With a final venomous glare at Nathan and Georgia, James turned and stalked back toward town. When they were gone, Georgia collapsed into a chair, shaking. That was terrifying. But it worked, Nathan said. We bought ourselves time, maybe a month, maybe more, and in that time, we can build a case, gather witnesses, prepare to fight this in court. Over the next several weeks, that was exactly what they did. Tom Sanderson helped them prepare legal arguments for why Georgia's marriage to James should be considered void. Maria provided medical testimony about the injuries Georgia had sustained, the infected knife wound, and the evidence of past violence. Other women in town, upon hearing Georgia's story, came forward with their own tales of seeing James drunk and abusive during his stay in Pinos Altos. Father Miguel prepared a statement about the validity of the religious ceremony he had performed. Through it all, James Coulter remained in town, a dark and brooding presence. He made no secret of his anger and his intentions. He told anyone who would listen that Georgia was a thief and an adulteress, that Nathan Rivers was a criminal who had stolen another man's wife. Some people believed him. Others, particularly the women who had met Georgia and seen her courage and kindness, took her side. The town became divided, tensions running high. There were arguments in the saloon, harsh words exchanged on the street. Nathan found himself challenged more than once by men who believed he had overstepped, who thought he should have minded his own business and let James take his wayward wife home. Nathan met each challenge with quiet firmness, refusing to be drawn into physical confrontations, but making his position clear. At home, Nathan and Georgia tried to build a life together, despite the uncertainty hanging over them. They were married in the eyes of God and the church, if not yet in the eyes of the law, and they took comfort in that. Nathan was unfailingly gentle with her, patient when the memories of James's cruelty made her fearful or anxious. Slowly, Georgia began to trust that this was real, that Nathan truly loved her and would never hurt her. They talked long into the night about their hopes and dreams. Nathan taught Georgia to ride his gentlest horse, and they would spend afternoons exploring the high country together. Georgia shared her love of reading with Nathan, reading aloud to him in the evenings from whatever books she could find. They were building a partnership, a true marriage of equals, and despite the danger they faced, they were happy. But the shadow of the impending court hearing hung over everything. As December approached and word came that Judge Morrison would arrive in Silver City just after Christmas, Nathan and Georgia knew that their time of reprieve was coming to an end. Soon, they would have to face James Coulter in court and trust that justice would prevail. The hearing was set for December 28, 1878. Nathan, Georgia, and Tom Sanderson made the journey to Silver City, accompanied by Maria and Father Miguel as witnesses. James Coulter was already there, along with a lawyer he had hired from Denver. Judge Morrison was a stern-faced man in his 60s, with a reputation for fairness, but also for strict adherence to the law. The hearing was held in a small courtroom that was packed with spectators, word having spread about the unusual case. James's lawyer spoke first, laying out a straightforward argument. Georgia Ramsey had married James Coulter in a legal ceremony in Denver in 1876. She was his wife under the law. She had abandoned him without cause, stolen his property, and then committed adultery by marrying another man while her husband still lived. The second marriage was invalid, and Georgia should be returned to her rightful husband immediately. Tom Sanderson's argument was more complex. He presented evidence of James's violence, including Maria's medical testimony and Georgia's own account of the abuse she had suffered. He argued that a marriage secured and maintained through violence and coercion was not a true marriage and should be dissolved. He presented Father Miguel's testimony about the religious ceremony, arguing that this gave Nathan a legitimate claim as Georgia's husband. He pointed to the community support Georgia had received in Pinos Altos as evidence that people who knew the situation believed she was in the right. Finally, Georgia herself took the stand. In a clear, steady voice, she described her marriage to James Coulter. She detailed the abuse she had suffered, the escalating violence, the night he had stabbed her. She explained why she had run, why she had preferred to die in the desert rather than return to him. "I am not property," she said, looking directly at the judge. "I am a human being. I deserve to live without fear, without pain. Nathan Rivers gave me that. He saved my life, not just by finding me in the desert, but by showing me that love does not have to hurt, that a man can be kind and gentle and still be strong. I am his wife now, in every way that matters. And I am begging you, Your Honor, do not send me back to a man who tried to kill me." James's lawyer tried to discredit her testimony, suggesting she was lying or exaggerating to escape her marital obligations. But under cross-examination, Georgia did not waver. Her account remained consistent and compelling. The hearing lasted most of the day. When all the testimony had been heard and all the arguments made, Judge Morrison called for a recess to consider his decision. Nathan and Georgia waited in an agony of suspense, holding hands so tightly their fingers went numb. After 2 hours, the judge returned. The courtroom fell silent. "This is an extraordinarily difficult case," Judge Morrison began. "On one hand, the law is clear. A marriage, once entered into, cannot be dissolved except under very specific circumstances. Mrs. Coulter, and I use that name because it is her legal name, made vows to her husband, and those vows are binding. However," the judge paused, and Nathan felt his heart sink. That one word seemed to carry the weight of doom. "However," the judge continued, "I have listened carefully to all the testimony presented here. I have examined the medical evidence of Mrs. Coulter's injuries. I have heard from witnesses who attest to her character and to the abuse she suffered, and I have heard from Mrs. Coulter herself, and I find her testimony credible and persuasive. The law may say that a wife belongs to her husband, but I cannot in good conscience send a woman back to a man who has tried to kill her. Whatever my personal feelings about the sanctity of marriage, I cannot ignore the evidence before me. Therefore, I am ruling as follows. The marriage between Georgia Ramsey and James Coulter is hereby annulled on the grounds of extreme cruelty and violence. Mrs. Ramsey is free from all legal obligations to Mr. Coulter. Furthermore, I am granting her petition to have her marriage to Nathan Rivers recognized under territorial law. As of this moment, Georgia Ramsey Rivers is the legal wife of Nathan Rivers, with all the rights and protections that entails. Mr. Coulter, you are to have no further contact with Mrs. Rivers. If you attempt to approach her or harm her in any way, you will face criminal charges. This court is adjourned." For a moment, Nathan could not process what he had heard. Then Georgia was in his arms, sobbing with relief, and he was holding her and laughing and crying all at once. They had won. Against all odds, justice had prevailed. James Coulter stood in stunned silence, his face a mask of rage. His lawyer tried to speak to him, but James shoved him aside and stormed out of the courtroom. Nathan tensed, ready to defend Georgia if James tried anything, but the man simply left, disappearing into the cold December afternoon. The ride back to Pinos Altos was joyful. Maria sang Mexican folk songs, Father Miguel offered prayers of thanksgiving, and Nathan and Georgia simply held each other, hardly able to believe their ordeal was finally over. When they reached town, they found that word had already spread. The people of Pinos Altos, who had supported Georgia, threw an impromptu celebration at the saloon. There was music and dancing and toasts to the newlyweds. Georgia, who had been so broken and hopeless just 4 months earlier, glowed with happiness. That night, alone in their house for the first time as legal husband and wife, Nathan and Georgia finally consummated their marriage. Nathan was infinitely gentle, patient with Georgia's nervousness and the shadows of past trauma. He showed her that physical intimacy could be beautiful rather than frightening, that desire could be shared rather than demanded. They took their time learning each other, building trust and pleasure together. Afterward, Georgia cried, but this time they were tears of joy and release. "I never thought I could feel this way," she whispered. "So safe, so loved." "Get used to it," Nathan said, kissing her forehead. "Because I plan to spend the rest of my life making you feel exactly this way." The years that followed were good ones. Nathan expanded his ranch, buying more cattle and hiring a couple of hands to help with the work. Georgia became a respected member of the community, known for her kindness and her work with the town's children, teaching them to read and write in an informal school she ran out of their home. In the spring of 1880, Georgia gave birth to their first child, a son they named Benjamin. The pregnancy had been difficult for Georgia, stirring up memories of the violence she had endured, but Nathan was there every step of the way, reassuring and supporting her. When Benjamin finally arrived, healthy and squalling, Georgia wept with joy. "He has your eyes," she told Nathan, gazing at their son with wonder. "And your stubborn spirit, I think," Nathan replied, watching the baby's tiny fists wave in the air. 2 years later, a daughter arrived, whom they named Sarah, after Nathan's sister. Then another son, Joseph, in 1885. The house that had once felt empty and silent was now full of noise and laughter and life. Georgia bloomed in her role as mother and wife. The shadows of her past never entirely left her, but they faded to distant memories, no longer defining who she was. She was happy, truly happy, perhaps for the first time in her life. Nathan watched his wife and children with a profound sense of gratitude. He had saved Georgia's life that day in the desert, but in truth, she had saved his as well. Before Georgia, Nathan had been going through the motions of living without really being alive. She had brought color and meaning and purpose to his existence. She had shown him what love really meant, not the pale shadow he had seen in other marriages, but the real thing, deep and true and lasting. They heard nothing more of James Coulter after the hearing. Some said he had returned to Colorado. Others claimed he had headed west to California. Wherever he had gone, he never tried to contact Georgia again, and for that, they were grateful. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Nathan took Georgia back to the ridge where he had first kissed her, where they had first admitted their love. They sat together watching the sunset, paint the sky in shades of orange and gold, their children playing nearby under the watchful eye of a hired girl. "Do you ever regret it?" Nathan asked. "Marrying me, I mean. Tying yourself to a simple rancher in a dusty little town." Georgia looked at him with such love and warmth that Nathan felt his breath catch. "Regret it? Nathan, you gave me my life back. You took a woman who wanted to die and made her want to live again. You showed me that I was worth saving, worth loving. Every single day with you has been a gift. How could I possibly regret that? I just want to make sure you are happy. I am happy, happier than I ever dreamed I could be." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you remember what you told me that first night, when I was barely conscious and begging you to let me die? I told you I would not. You breathed life back into me, Nathan. You breathed on the ember when my will to live had flickered down to almost gone, and you made it flame again. You brought me back from the darkness, and every day since, you have kept that flame burning bright." Nathan wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "We saved each other, I think." "Yes," Georgia agreed. "We did." They sat together in the gathering dusk, watching their children play, listening to the sounds of life and love and home. The past was behind them, with all its pain and struggle. The future stretched out ahead, full of possibility and promise. And the present, this moment right here, was exactly where they were meant to be. In the years that followed, Nathan and Georgia grew old together on their ranch outside Pinos Altos. They watched their children grow up, get married, and have children of their own. Benjamin took over the ranch operations, proving himself a skilled cattleman and businessman. Sarah married a doctor and moved to Santa Fe, though she visited often. Joseph became a teacher, following in his mother's footsteps. Georgia never lost her love of reading and learning. Even as her hair turned silver and her hands grew gnarled with arthritis, she could be found most evenings reading by the fire, sharing interesting passages with Nathan. She wrote poetry too, beautiful verses about love and survival, and the wild landscape she had come to call home. Some of her poems were published in territorial newspapers, and she became known throughout New Mexico as a woman of letters. Nathan remained the strong, steady presence he had always been. He treated his wife with the same gentle respect and adoration he had shown her from the beginning, never once raising his voice to her or treating her with anything less than complete tenderness. The townspeople of Pinos Altos held him up as an example of what a husband should be. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were nearly 30 people present, including children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. A huge meal was prepared, and toasts were offered to the couple who had built such a beautiful life together against such terrible odds. Benjamin stood to speak, his own children clustered around his legs. "Most of you know the story of how my parents met," he said. "How my father found my mother dying in the desert and refused to let her give up. How he fought for her, defied the law for her, risked everything for her. I have spent my whole life watching their love, learning from their example. They have shown me what marriage should look like, what partnership and respect and devotion really mean. Pa, Ma, thank you for being the kind of parents and the kind of people that your children could be proud of. Thank you for showing us how to love." There was not a dry eye in the room. Georgia reached for Nathan's hand, and he squeezed it gently. They did not need words. After 40 years together, they could communicate entire conversations with a glance, a touch, a smile. That night, after all the guests had left and the house had grown quiet, Nathan and Georgia sat together on their front porch, wrapped in a blanket against the cool night air. The stars were brilliant overhead, the same stars they had watched together so many times over the decades. "I have been thinking," Georgia said quietly, "about that day in the desert when you found me. I was so close to the end, Nathan, another hour, maybe 2, and I would have been dead. My will to live had flickered down to almost nothing, and then you appeared, like an answer to a prayer I did not even know I was praying. You breathed on that tiny ember, and it became a flame, and that flame has burned bright and strong for 40 years now. And it will keep burning," Nathan said, "for as long as we both shall live. I know, but when the time comes, when one of us has to go on without the other, I want you to remember something. What is that? That our love does not end. That what we built here, what we created together, it goes on. In our children, in our grandchildren, in the lives we touched and the people we helped. We may have started with just 2 broken people trying to survive, but look what we made, Nathan. Look at this beautiful life." "It is beautiful," Nathan agreed, "and it is all because of you. No, it is because of us, together." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the chirp of crickets, the soft sigh of wind through the juniper and pinon. They had weathered so much together, survived so much, built so much, and through it all, the love that had sparked that autumn evening on a ridge overlooking Pinos Altos had never dimmed. Nathan and Georgia Rivers lived to see their 50th wedding anniversary in the winter of 1928. Nathan was 76 by then, Georgia 73. They were old and weathered, their bodies marked by decades of hard work and frontier living, but their spirits remained strong. The love in their eyes when they looked at each other was as bright as it had been on their wedding day. The celebration was smaller this time. Some of their friends had passed on, and the journey to the ranch was harder for elderly relatives. But their children and grandchildren came, filling the house with warmth and laughter once again. Stories were told, memories were shared, and the golden thread of family and love that Nathan and Georgia had woven held them all together. Nathan died peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, at the age of 78. Georgia was holding his hand when he passed, and she felt the exact moment his spirit left, felt the hand in hers go from warm and alive to simply flesh. She sat with him for a long time, tears streaming down her face, but also smiling, because she had been so blessed, so incredibly fortunate to have had 52 years with this man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. At his funeral, she stood before the assembled mourners and spoke from the heart. "Nathan gave me life twice," she said, her voice clear despite her tears. "Once when he found me dying in the desert and refused to let me go. And again, every single day we spent together. He showed me what love really means. He taught me that I was worthy of being loved, worthy of being cherished, worthy of taking up space in the world. He was the best man I have ever known, and I am so grateful that God allowed us to walk this path together." Georgia lived for 3 more years after Nathan's death, She spent her remaining time surrounded by her children and grandchildren, sharing stories of Nathan and their life together, making sure that his memory and their love story would be passed down through the generations. She wrote a long poem, perhaps her finest, about a cowboy who had breathed life into a dying ember and made it flame. It was read at her funeral and became something of a legend in New Mexico territory, reprinted in newspapers and taught in schools. When Georgia Ramsey Rivers died in 1933 at the age of 78, she was laid to rest beside Nathan in the small cemetery outside Pinos Altos. Their shared headstone bore a simple inscription: Nathan Rivers, 1852-1930, Georgia Ramsey Rivers, 1855-1933. He breathed on the ember until flame, together forever. The ranch they had built together was passed down to Benjamin and his children, and it remained in the Rivers family for generations. The house where they had raised their children, where they had loved and laughed and built a life together, stood as a testament to what two people could create when they refused to give up on each other. And on quiet nights, when the wind sighed through the pinon and juniper, old-timers in Pinos Altos would tell the story of Nathan and Georgia Rivers. They would talk about how a cowboy found a dying woman in the desert and refused to let her go, how he fought for her against the law and society and a violent husband, how they built a love so strong that it became legendary, a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. It was a story of survival and courage, of fighting for what is right even when the odds seem impossible. But most of all, it was a love story, the kind that reminded people that even in the harshest environments, even when hope seems lost, love can flourish, love can heal, love can save. Nathan had breathed on Georgia's ember when her will to live had flickered down to almost gone, and together they had created a flame that burned bright for over 50 years. And though they were both gone now, that flame lived on in their children and grandchildren, in the ranch they had built, in the community they had served, and in the hearts of everyone who heard their story and believed, even for a moment, in the power of true and lasting love.